Obsession isn't disturbing because of the supernatural or demonic possession of Nikki. The true terror lies in Bear's possession of Nikki. But most disturbing of all, obsession forces us to examine our role in watching another person be stripped of their agency and dehumanized. We, as viewers, are implicated. There are spoilers ahead since we'll be discussing the film in full, so consider yourself warned and let's get to it. Obsession is a warning about the consequences of asserting your will over another human being. It's about the violence that occurs when a relationship is built on control, manipulation, and ownership. Obsession takes dehumanization, something that occurs in the real world every second of every day on a minor and extreme scale, and magnifies it using the relationship between Bear and Nikki. What makes the film so terrifying is also what makes it so upsetting, that humans dehumanize other humans so easily. It's not a new concept, but obsession doesn't feel like a run-of-the-mill horror. What makes obsession so interesting is Bear. Bear starts out as our protagonist. Right off the bat, we learn that he has an obsessive, years-long crush on Nikki, one of his 3 best friends. The film opens with Bear rehearsing his profession of love for Nikki on a waitress who sits in a booth opposite him as his best friend Ian watches on. The true horror of this speech isn't obvious right away. Or, it wasn't to me, I guess I can only speak to my own complicity. But we'll return to this scene in a little bit. Bear gets home to find his cat Sandy dead after dining on his grandmother's opioids. Bear is upset, but not too upset to lay in bed and stalk Nikki's Instagram. His stalking session is interrupted by a phone call from Nikki. She convinces Bear not to skip their weekly trivia night by revealing she has put in her 2 weeks' notice at their shared job. This trivia night is the only time we get to see what the real Nikki is like. It's our only reference for comparing just how drastically her behavior changes. But it's enough. I want to highlight 3 instances between the real Nikki and Bear that raise alarm bells. Bear is driving Nikki home from trivia night. Nikki is talking about the novel she's writing, but we get an indication that Bear doesn't really understand her. He says,
"It's a romance."
and Nikki contradicts him.
No, it's not a romance, it's a love story.
Instead of trying to understand Nikki, to comprehend the difference to her, the genre of the novel she's writing, which is obviously important to her, Bear just laughs dismissively, asking,
Isn't that the same thing?
The second instance is slightly more sinister. Bear tells Nikki he got her a gift and then expresses dissatisfaction with her response.
What?
Was he?
Ew, no, why does that make you nervous?
I don't know. That's an odd reaction.
This reveals the controlling side of Bear and suggests that he doesn't love Nikki. He loves the idea of Nikki. And he has expectations for how she should act. He's not satisfied with the real her. He wants to control her. Third and finally, the most obvious and disturbing example. As Nikki is walking to her door, Bear calls after her using a nickname Nikki hates.
Night, Freaky Nikki.
A nickname that was used by her childhood bullies. This shows that he will try anything to make Nikki want him, even when he knows it hurts her.
Ew, don't call me that.
I know, I was kidding.
You know I don't like that.
Sorry.
Bear is willing to violate Nikki's boundaries to get what he wants. Nikki angrily storms back to the car and asks Bear point blank,
Do you like me?
She says now is the time to tell me. And because Bear is our protagonist, and the last several minutes have been extremely uncomfortable, we're basically screaming at the screen for him to confess his feelings to her. We've ignored the red flags and are still rooting for him. But Bear lies. He denies his feelings. And this is where Bear quickly devolves into the film's antagonist. Bear's role as our dual protagonist and villain makes for a heightened viewing experience because it challenges us to relate to someone who continuously violates someone else's agency and consent in the name of love. What unfolds is horrific, not because of the supernatural possession of Nikki, it's terrifying because of Bear's possession of Nikki. And because the film places us on Bear's side, it's an extra uncomfortable viewing experience because we have to decide when to turn against him, when to separate ourselves from our protagonist. Like I said, we are rooting for Bear at first. And I don't think there's one moment where viewers unanimously turn against him for his treatment of Nikki. It seems like people condemn him at different moments or even not at all. Just like in real life, once you get to know someone, it can become more difficult to condemn them, even when another person is being actively harmed. We ignore the signs from the very start, or at least downplay the significance of them. Obsession shines an uncomfortable light on this complicity, on the fact that we as bystanders are implicated in the dehumanization and abuse we witness. It's time to return to the very first scene to really see the part we play in the violence Nikki faces. Bear does not initially come across as this big menacing villain, despite the fact that the aforementioned speech is extremely offensive and contains several indicators that Bear views Nikki not as an autonomous person, but as an object. The object of his affection and desire, but still an object. This is obvious from the nice guy cliches that veil the more disturbing signs of incel ideology.
You're in every song I listen to. You were the only person that was nice to me when I moved here. And at first I thought maybe... I think about you all the time, Nikki. I'm gonna try not to.
This speech reveals that Bear doesn't have control over his obsession with Nikki. That his infatuation isn't about Nikki, it's about him. Bear's objectification of Nikki devolves into outright dehumanization in a steady, chilling way. It begins with Bear's wish on the One Wish Willow, a magic stick he purchased as a joke for Nikki, but decides to use for himself after he fails to muster up the courage to tell her he likes her. Bear's wish fundamentally disregards Nikki's autonomy. He wishes for Nikki Freeman to love him more than anyone in the world. Nikki Freeman is an ironic name, given that this wish imprisons her in her own body, rendering her unable to control her own actions. Nikki's demeanor changes immediately. Bear makes it clear that she isn't acting like herself, that he's alarmed by her behavior. We get a shot of Bear looking from Nikki to the One Wish Willow, confirming Bear's understanding of what is happening, and as a result confirming his guilt. Bear expresses his concern, but still takes Nikki back to his grandma's house, where he takes advantage of her sexually. This idea of being taken advantage of is repeated throughout the film. Bear becomes extremely defensive at the suggestion that he is taking advantage of Nikki.
I'm not saying that you took advantage of me.
Nikki, I didn't know you were on drugs.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that.
Not saying what?
You took advantage of me.
I don't think I didn't.
I know, that's why I'm saying you didn't.
Okay, good.
This is strange, dude. It's like Nikki snapped into a different person. She's all of a sudden infatuated with you.
It kind of looks like Nikki's going through something. And it kind of looks like you're taking advantage of the situation. And I say it with love, bro. I'm saying it with love. I'm on your side, but it's a bad look.
But when Sarah suggests that Nikki is taking advantage of him, he seems pleased.
I don't think it's okay that she's taking advantage of you.
I don't think she's taking advantage of me.
Bear really does see himself as the victim. These scenes highlight the difficult reality that only Bear can release Nikki from the abuse she faces. Outsiders want to intervene, try to help, but there's nothing they can do but watch as Bear exercises his control over Nikki. We're constantly presented with cat symbolism, drawing comparisons between the relationship between human and pet and the relationship between Bear and Nikki. Bear is confronted with his moral obligation to take care of Nikki, mirroring the obligation we have to our pets who rely on us completely for affection and survival. Nikki is the cat. I'm not saying that Nikki is possessed by the spirit of Bear's dead cat. I'm saying that she is no longer human. The real Nikki is trapped, unable to use her own body or express herself. And what is left is nothing more than a pet. Someone who depends completely on Bear in order to function and has no desires or thoughts outside of pleasing him. The One Wish Willow is made by the company Tabby Cat, really driving home the point that Bear's infatuation with Nikki is not built on love or mutual respect. It is built on ownership and possession. He sees her not as a person with dreams, a person who is trying to write a novel, but as a thing to be owned by him, a thing to enhance his own life. Bear's dual role as protagonist and antagonist is visually represented through reflections and mirrors. We often see multiple versions of Bear's face in one shot using mirrors, or we see Bear's face only through reflections. This clues us into the fact that there are multiple versions of Bear, or that he may not be exactly what he seems. Nikki, on the other hand, is often presented as faceless. This choice visually drives home her lack of agency and dehumanization at the hands of Bear. This facelessness emphasizes Bear's view of Nikki as an object, and it's a very effective source of horror. The most disturbing scenes are the ones where the real Nikki breaks out of the spell and takes control of her body again. These are the scenes that show us what a villain Bear truly is. This happens 6 times during Nikki's possession, and it starts immediately. Nikki first breaks out of the spell when she's talking to Bear outside his car, right after he makes the wish.
Wait, what the fuck?
What the fuck? Are you okay?
I'm acting so weird. This is so weird.
What the fuck?
It happens again when they're kissing at Bear's house that same night.
What the fuck?
After the scene where Bear asks Nikki if her dad really has cancer, she freaks out in the restaurant, asking him, "Why does it matter?" Bear says,
Doesn't matter to me.
and then we cut to Bear having sex with Nikki's body as the camera zooms in on her face, trapped. Feeling overwhelmed and unable to manage Nikki's extreme behavior, Bear calls the One Wish Willow customer service line with a twisted request. He doesn't want to cancel his wish. He doesn't want to release Nikki from his possession. He wants to alter his wish to better suit him. He wants to assert further control over Nikki. The customer service representative tells him this isn't possible, and we hear what I believe is the real Nikki screaming continuously on the other end.
Who is that?
Nikki. Do you want to speak to her?
The next snap out happens during an extremely unsettling game at Ian's party, where Nikki disturbs and worries all the guests with her strange behavior. The real Nikki suddenly gains control of her body, screaming to everyone, but only Bear knows what she's talking about, and he stays silent. Finally, when Bear is sneaking out of bed to meet Sarah, the real Nikki speaks, pleading with him to kill her. Bear's response is the scariest part of the movie.
What would be so bad? What's so bad about being with me?
The real Nikki, paralyzed in her own body, explicitly states that it isn't her and that she's never been with him. Bear responds not with concern, understanding, empathy, or humanity, but with anger and offense. He's angry at someone who is paralyzed in her own body and begging for his mercy, completely helpless because of him, and he still feels like the victim. Bear started as our protagonist, but he certainly ends as our antagonist. His actions caused the deaths of his 2 best friends and the constant physical and emotional torture that Nikki endures. Bear never redeems himself. but we get some sweet poetic justice in his death. At the end, Bear is robbed of his own agency, just as he robbed Nikki of hers, and it directly causes his death. Bear is trying to make himself vomit up the pills he overdosed on, his final act of cowardice in his inability to release Nikki from his control. Just as he's trying to save himself, something the cat couldn't do because it was a pet and not a person, Nikki breaks her own one-wish willow and steals his autonomy. Bear immediately takes his fingers out of his throat and walks to Nikki. Because of his loss of autonomy, Bear dies. He overdoses on the pills he never vomited up. Bear became exactly what he turned Nikki into, a possession, a pet who can't take care of itself, even to save its own life. Thanks so much for watching. Comment down below, when did Bear become the antagonist for you? Or do you completely disagree with me? I'd really appreciate if you could give this video a like and a comment. This is a new channel, so it would help me a lot. I promise my videos will keep improving, and you can still be one of my first subscribers. Thanks again. Hope to talk to you below.